Hey everybody, welcome to the presentation today. The topic is going to be HTML9, how you can prepare for it because it's coming tomorrow. Just kidding. Actually, today's topic is Visual Studio Code. It's one of my favorite topics actually, because one thing we all do is we all do a ton of coding online super fast as we want to get through our day-to-day work life. And we do different languages, we do different platforms, we do different frameworks and technologies. So having the right tools to kind of get out of our way and be able to code as fast as we can and do as much as we possibly can, it's going to be really important. So there's a new tool out called Visual Studio Code, and we're going to talk a lot about this today. But to start things off, I wanted to kick things out with a poll. So first, if we could kind of help me answer these questions. What platform do you develop on? I'd like to know, do you guys use a Mac or do you use Windows? And if you use both, please check both of these. Hopefully you're at least using one of them. Sweet, just click on those results. I can see those guys coming in here. It looks like we've got a good mix of folks. A lot of people are using Windows, more than double of Mac, but we've got a ton of Mac folks as well. Yes, and Linux. Yep. So I see some folks are using Linux too. Awesome. So as you're developing there, something that would be interesting to know is what kind of languages are you using? So what language do you use most of all here? And definitely check the one you use the most, but you can also check multiple here because some of us are polyglots, like myself, which sounds like a bad word, but it means that you develop in many languages. So are you using CoffeeScript or Ruby or JavaScript or COBOL? You can check other for COBOL if you're doing that these days. By the way, if you're a COBOL developer, not much I can do for you on this particular webinar. Sweet. So we've got a ton of C# and a ton of JavaScript actually running neck and neck as the leaders. And then we've got some TypeScript folks running up third, and then the infamous other category. Well, the good news is that we've got some people all across the board here. We've got OS X and Mac. We've got JavaScript, TypeScript, C#, Python. The nice thing for all of you is that this presentation is for all of you because Visual Studio Code will work on both platforms and on Linux, and it will also help you work with many of these languages, and some of them are coming still. So with that, let's talk a little about Visual Studio Code. It's, the way I like to describe it, is a fast, lightweight, cross-platform editor. And my name is John Papa. Some of you may know me from Pluralsight. I do a lot of the courses there. And three of my courses that kind of relate to this talk are TypeScript Fundamentals, which Dan Walleen and I have done, a good friend of mine, Angular Patterns, Clean Code, and then JavaScript Build Automation with Go. So you can check these guys out here, and I want to talk about what the problem is here. So one of the things that we have to do all the time is figure out how do we get very, very productive on both Mac and Windows. And we used to have to choose. On Windows, I would use Visual Studio. And then on a Mac, I would use maybe WebStorm or Sublime or maybe Brackets or Atom or something else entirely. The problem we get down to is, can we use the same tool on both platforms where we want to switch back and forth because sometimes we have to, maybe using parallels even. And then how do we make sure that if we got guys on our team that are working on maybe Windows and maybe some other folks are working on a Mac, how do we all use the same tools if we'd like to accomplish the same things? And we want it to be fast and yet powerful. So the answer to this right now, the way I'm looking, is going to be Visual Studio Code. So VS Code, or just Code for short, is a great tool because for me it solves that, make it fast, make it powerful enough for what I need, and allow me to work cross-platform. So who is this created by? I think it's really important to look at not just what can this tool do, but who created it and where is it heading? So to start off with, the two main folks driving behind this at Microsoft are Eric Gamma and Chris Diaz. So Eric, if you're not familiar with him, is of the Gang of Four in the Design Patterns book, and he used to work at IBM and basically was a lead engineer on Java's Eclipse. And he also worked at Microsoft, I think 4 years ago he went there, and he's worked on the Monaco editor. So there's plenty of editor experience there with Eric and also with Chris, who has been a principal program manager for them and has worked on a lot of the Visual Studio tooling and also Monaco. So the pairing of these two guys together really is what brought about Visual Studio Code. And the key thing it's really solving here for us is the cross-platform story with multiple languages and platforms. So you can use it whether you're working with the penguin or the X or the window. Right now, you've got options. So we could use Angular or in JavaScript, or we could use Node with TypeScript, or we can use ASP.NET 5, which is in beta with C#. All these choices are coming here out of the box right now, and then more of them are coming with code. So let's take a look at what are we really trying to solve again. We had the problem statement of it's got to be fast, and it's got to be powerful, and work cross-platform. But you hear a lot, oh, my favorite tool is Sublime, or my favorite tool is Visual Studio. And we also hear things like, well, why don't we just bring Visual Studio over to the Mac? So let's look at that for a minute and think about what that means. There's an editor and there's an IDE. The editor is on one side of the spectrum and the IDE is in the other. And these are just terms that I've kind of made up here and thinking about this in a scale. And I borrowed these from our build talk that Eric Gamma and Chris put together. So I really like this paradigm because it helps frame what we're trying to accomplish. The editor is something that gives you things like it's lightweight and fast. It's file and folder based. You can support many languages and workflows, and you can fly through the code with the keyboard. Things like Sublime fall directly on the editor platform. Yeah, you can extend it and there's plugins for it, but it really is built to be like a super fast editor, so you can type like crazy. What's an IDE? Well, Visual Studio is a great example of an IDE, or IntelliJ. Here we can do things with project systems like solution files and project files. And it understands the code a lot better, and debugging is super, super rich in these. And you have integrated build processes for Grunt and Gulp and Broccoli and all these other kind of tools. You've got maybe T3 templates, or maybe you've got your own Yeoman generators built in. File new and wizards. A lot of times those are custom wizards. Designers. Integration with ALM, CI/CD for continuous integration and deployment. Maybe buttons all over the place, very mouse heavy that you can use, and a lot of platform-specific tools. So you've got power on the right, and you've got speed on the left. For me, that sweet spot is right about here. I want to fly through my code because 90% of the time, and I'm making this number up, but 90% of the time, I want to fly through everything I've got to do, type in like crazy, get what I got to get done. I know what I need to do on the keyboard, but I do need some extra features. Like I want to be able to debug. I mean, without debugging, it's just basically Notepad on steroids, right? So here's what I like to look at. The stuff on the left, like lightweight and fast with files and folders, but I want to have some project context about what my project means, but I don't want to have that project file or a solution file. I want to just open up and point at a folder and say, let's go. I want to support multiple languages because right now I do multiple languages. I do C# on the server or Node, and I use TypeScript, and then on the client I'm using Angular. And it's got to be keyboard centered because I like to fly through the keyboard without having to touch the mouse. Every time I have to touch the mouse, it really slows me down. And then on the other side, I want to have code understanding. I want to be able to get IntelliSense and autocomplete and hints and peek and find all references, stuff like that that we've historically gotten out of tools like plugins like ReSharper for Visual Studio, or through WebStorm, which is more of an IDE in my opinion. And I also debug and do some task running. So if you fall on that scale right about there with Visual Studio Code, I think we're hitting the right spot. So code is a new choice of tool, and the points I like to pick out here is its simplicity of a code editor. It makes it simple to use, just like Sublime, for example, which is to me the epitome of an editor, and it gives you the things that you need to add on to that to allow you to have that code edit debug cycle. Because what do you do all day? You write code, you refactor the code, you debug the code, and you run the code. You do that cycle over and over and over again. And that way we're constantly producing code. So now that code is out there, VS Code, how did they build this thing? Well, what they did is they said, who's already got something we can build upon? Is there any open platform that we can use? Well, Atom, which is an editor from the GitHub team, was built on top of this open source technology, the Atom shell, which is now called Electron. And they basically used this with VS Code and said, hey, we're going to use that same open source platform to build code on top of it. But then they're going to add on their own features to basically make it a super editor. So the two big things that they included were TypeScript and OmniSharp. So TypeScript, as many of you probably know, is basically JavaScript on steroids. It's a way to write JavaScript today with a few extra features for like static typings or maybe interfaces to help you get better tooling and write better code. And then OmniSharp is a way that you get IntelliSense for things like C# on other platforms. And if you use Sublime today or Brackets or WebStorm, this is how you're actually getting IntelliSense for C# on a Mac on those platforms. So Code takes both these things and built it into the tool to allow us to take advantage of what TypeScript offers and what OmniSharp offers. So here's a quick list, just kind of scattered around the screen, of different features that you get when you're using Visual Studio Code. One of the nice things about this is you're getting a ton of features out of the box, like debugging, tasks, Git integration, which is quite cool. You've got Peek, which we'll take a look at, and how do you preview your code. Code actions to automatically add and refactor on the fly. You can show your errors and warnings. You can find all the references. And what's nice for me is you can customize the keyboard. You don't like something that's got a certain keystroke pattern? Change it. You want to add a keystroke pattern to some custom event? Add it. So you can do a lot of cool things right inside the editor. So where else has this been built? Well, I mentioned that Eric and Chris both worked on Monaco. And if you remember, there's a Visual Studio Online editor, which is up there, and it looks very similar to Code. So basically, Monaco is the engine built for this. And from what I understand from the folks who built this, they use the same source code base to actually share between this and Code for the basically the brains of it. So this is an online editor called Monaco inside the browser you can use, and it's used now on the desktop, combined in with Electron. You can also see this as the basis for the tools inside of Internet Explorer 11. That's what you're seeing in the bottom left here. Or if you use OneDrive, you can see those tools in here. And you also get that great Git integration out of the box, which is really nice, and that kind of came out of the VS Online story. So the point here is that it's not something that just kind of came out of nowhere. It's definitely something that evolved over time, and it's had a tried and true background. Not only with the people who worked on it have a lot of experience creating editors, but they also have done a lot of this right here with the same source code at Microsoft. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at some demos for us first. Let's switch over. I'll share my monitor. Here we go. So I want to make sure that we're looking at the right monitor here. If I could get a little feedback from you, Lindsay, just to make sure we're seeing the code.
John, I can see the code on the screen. It looks good.
Beautiful. Awesome. So right now we're looking at Visual Studio Code. I just brought that up with a sample project, and I'll show you where you can get these projects later if you want to tinker with it. But one thing I want to do is I want to close it. So I'm going to hit Command Q and just close code. Now I'm going to use my editor here. I'm going to type in code, and I haven't hit Enter yet. But as soon as I hit Enter, let's count how long it takes to show up. And bearing any screen lag, let's see what happens. So I'm going to hit Enter now. And there's your Studio Code, and there it's loaded. By my count, that was about 2 seconds to open it and then load the project. Pretty good. Now let's try this using Sublime, where I'm not going to actually load a project, but I'm going to type in Sublime, and I'm going to hit Enter right now. And there's Sublime. A little bit faster because that's the pure total editor. Oh, I better get my Social Security number off there. Hold on a sec. Cool. Don't save that. Yeah. So then let's open up Brackets, which is another competitor here on the Mac. 1, 2, 3, now. And Brackets is loading, and the project is coming, and there it is. So the project actually takes a little longer to load inside of Brackets. Same project, actually. We'll close that. And now let's open up WebStorm, one of the other competitors. 1, 2, 3, now. I'm opening up WebStorm. It's loading. It's thinking, and it's coming. Go get some coffee, get a drink, take a nap. There it is. All right, so WebStorm takes a little longer, and that's why that one's more on the side of an IDE. A little bit slower to load and use, but it's got a ton more features. All right, so let's close that, and then the final one we'll compare it to is Atom. So I'm going to hit Enter now on Atom. Enter. And we can see him load up, built on the same thing that Electron is using with under the covers for code. So we can kind of see how the different editors have different speeds. And let's go back to code one last time. I just killed it. I'm going to type code and hit Enter now. And you can see that the speed difference there is code is about the fastest one other than Sublime, or at least it's on par with everything that's there. It's definitely faster than the IDEs. So that's really, really cool. And for me, that's nice because I can also open up new code instances. So I can pull code over there on the left. Maybe I want to look at a different project. So instead, what I can do is I hit a command of Command-Shift-N, or I could go to the File window and do a new window. And then I've got code here. And I can open up the side pane and open a folder. And let's go browse in John Papa's hard drive, see what's in there. We'll open up this guy. So now I can open up a second project on the right-hand side, one on the left. No big deal. Maybe I don't like the particular scheme that I've got going on here, so I could actually switch to dark or light and toggle between there. And I actually map keyboard commands to do that. So what's cool is you can have multiple of these open at the same time, which is actually pretty useful. So let's say I wanted to edit a README file. And we'll just use this one real quick. And in the README, I can open a separate pane. So what I'm doing now is I'm hitting Command-2. I'm going to open up a separate pane. I've got the same file open in bold. I'm going to hit Preview on my Markdown file. So now there's my Markdown. And I can go over here on the left. And as I'm changing the one over here, I can say, hello, everyone, which I can't spell. And as it's writing, you can see it on the right-hand side. So it's pretty cool. We've got Markdown Editor and intelligent information right out of the box. So let's go ahead and delete that. There's my hot towel file. And let's say that I wanted to see a third pane. I can hit Command-3, and we'll open up some other file in there. Let's go ahead and open up, I don't know, how about the git ignore? So now I've got 4 things open. It's kind of crowded. So I hit Command-B. I can collapse the sidebar. And now I've got Command 1, 2, or 3 to toggle between the windows. So I go to Command-1. I'm over on the right-hand side. Command-2, Command-3, toggle between them. Let's say I really want to see what's in the README more. So what I can do is I can go ahead and I can grab my bar right here. I'm never good at grabbing bars. Drag it all the way over to the left. Or that's the right, actually. So we do that now. And let's say I'm done editing over on this side. I'm typing through here. Everything's great. And now I want to go ahead and see what the output looks like more. If I hit Command-2, notice that the Command-2 opened up the middle pane to the same width and size as Command-1, the first panel, used to be. So this is kind of a nice little accordion feature where you can have 3 panels open and toggle between them. Now I'm on 3. Now I'm back to 1. And you can open up the one that you want to. And when I'm done, say, I'm kind of done looking at git ignore, I can hit Command-3 and then do a Command-W to close that one. Or I could have just hit the X up here as well. So I can hit the X, and we can close that guy. I'm now looking at my README. Command-B will open back up to my sidebar and look at my Explorer. And I'm back in fashion to edit things. So let's close this one window. We'll go back to the gulp patterns. This is the other gulp, the code window that I wanted to open up. Now let's take a look at some of the features that are in here. So this is a plain old JavaScript project. There is no TypeScript in here. They're all JS files. And this project's got a couple weird things going on. First, it's got this, I don't know what the heck Angular is. Well, who doesn't know what Angular is? VS Code doesn't, so how does it know what to do? You'll notice this little light bulb. And the name of this thing, I think it's called a code action or a quick fix. The name has changed on us here a little. If you click on it, you're going to see some suggestions, like add a reference to angular.d.ts. This is really, really important. I'm in a JavaScript project, and it's telling me add a reference to a TypeScript definition file for Angular. This does not mean it's going to convert your project to TypeScript. This is a really cool merging of 2 worlds. So if you're a person who's worked in JavaScript and you don't know TypeScript, this is awesome. Because now you can click on this, and it's going to add a reference to that typing file and give you IntelliSense for Angular in your project without you having to know anything about TypeScript. That's pretty darn cool. So the other way to do that is go ahead, instead of using the mouse, you can use Command-Dot. And that'll open up that option. And then we can select to add the triple reference. I hit Enter. Notice it put a mark at the top of the file to say, go find this typings file. And down at the bottom, we can see a typings folder, which had then added the angular.d.ts file. So what actually happened is, code saw that Angular was something it could not recognize. It knew that Angular was a reserved word. It's on a whitelist for Visual Studio Code. And it said, hey, you know what? I'm going to go out and look in this database. There's this definitely typed database up on GitHub. where it's got a list of typings for all the major popular libraries out there, and a lot of the minor ones too. And it said, I know what that is. It's Angular. I'm going to go ahead and grab that typings file from GitHub, pull it down, stick it in your project, and give you IntelliSense. So now we can go ahead and get IntelliSense. So I can type things in here like, hey, let's do Angular dot module. And notice that module pops up in my list. And you can see that's a global place for creating modules. So I can say, all right, let's do that. And now I'll type in app.core, because that's the module I'm in. Now I can type in controller. And for the controller, it gives me autocomplete syntax here for you can define the name and the constructor, or I can just use down arrows to see what the other signatures are. And I can type them in as I go. So I can define a controller here, and we'll call this my controller. And then I can define a function over here for what that controller looks like. So I'm getting awesome IntelliSense there, and I get a Command X to delete that because I'm done with that guy. But I also get some cool IntelliSense on other things, like $HTTP. It knows what that is because it's got the Angular typings. It sees it's the HTTP service. It also knows what location is, and queue. So if I come down here and I want to type a new function, let's create a function, and I want to say go get stuff, because that's a greatly named function. And in here we'll put in HTTP, and then down here we can say return $HTTP, and I can use my tab to open it up, and I can say get. Oops, it's actually a $1 sign. Yep. And then on the get, we can say what the URL is, and I can say somewhere out there. And then we can actually just call that and be done. So now we've got a function which is telling us, hey, this is local. It's not actually used anywhere. That's what the green line's for. But it's actually using IntelliSense and autocomplete to help us fill in what $HTTP does for us. So that's pretty darn cool. Let's say that we had a new service. Let's go ahead and create a new one here. So we'll come back up, and let's create a service, create a factory actually, and that factory, we'll get rid of the semicolon. Let's call this John, the John factory, and we'll make a function down below called John. I'm going to type in function John, and there's our factory, and we're going to need to return some kind of signature. So there it is, and we'll have something like get data. So that's going to be our function. And let's say we type that guy in, we get data, and in there we actually had that return statement to say go ahead and get $HTTP, and we'll say go get foo from the URL. Now the problem is it's saying I don't know what HTTP is. So we can check the quick hints here, and it'll say mark it as global. That's not really what we want, but we can go up here and start typing in, all right, well, that's going to be injected up top. So it's giving us help to say, all right, you've missed something down here. It's going to be global unless you say otherwise, so we can go back and inject it. So we're getting some basic help here out of the editor, and I'm just using JavaScript in this case, but it's taking advantage of all the Typescript typings that we have. So another example might be, let's say you're using jQuery, which I'm not in this project, so if I type in that, and I go out and I find some ID called table header, and then I want to bind a click event to it. And in there I've got some function which has got some kind of code that might be running. The problem here is it doesn't know what that is, and maybe I don't know if there's a click handler on it. Maybe it's not click, maybe it's click me, or maybe it's do it. I don't know what it's called. So here, again, I can click on command dot, and it says, you know what, that might be jQuery. So I can go ahead and add jQuery as a reference up top, and then once I have that, I go back down here to do it, I put the dot in, and I can see, all right, well, there we go. It's click. And what kind of overload does it have? One of them expects a handler, and then another one's got an event object, and then we can just do click without anything. So we can see here that even just with basic JavaScript, we can get a ton of features out of the box, which is pretty darn cool. So let's switch gears a little bit here. And let's say we're not just working in JavaScript. Maybe we're working inside of HTML. So let's go into the HTML file. Those of you who may be familiar with Emmet, there's some cool features in here. So let's say you want to type in a div. All you do is type div, and you can hit tab, and it's going to put the div in there. Well, that's cool. But what if inside that div you wanted to do a UL with some LIs? So now we can say create a UL with an LI times 10, and I hit tab. it's going to create a UL with 10 LIs. And notice the cursor blinking and then the thin one at the bottom. So I could type things in here like 1, hit tab, 2, 3, 4, and you guys know how to count, but that's basically how it ends up going. And then hit escape when you want to get out of that mode. So it allowed me to create a whole bunch of stuff just by entering it in here. So Emmet support is out of the box with what we've got here. And you can also do things like, all right, let's create the UL, let's create an LI, we'll do ×4 this time. And maybe you want to stick something inside of there like a class. That's got to be a class called foo. So we can type anything like that in there and then hit our tabs and break things up. So we've got Emmet. That's cool. What if we have some CSS? So let's go ahead and open up styles.css. Inside of my styles here, let's say that I wanted to hover over something. And you can see what that applies to. So we can see here that .button is applying to anything that's an element that has a class of button. So if you want to see what that would actually do, like let's say you look at .navbar star. What is that? If I hover over it, it says basically this class is going to apply to any element that has navbar that has an element inside of it. So it'll apply to the element inside of that. So it's pretty cool that we can actually look at these things. And we can actually, oops, wrong one. We can actually just hover over it and then hold the command key down, and it'll actually show you the definition. It's like a peek or a preview at that definition. So I'm holding the command key down while I hover over the item in the CSS, which is pretty darn cool. So let's say you're inside of a less file instead. So in less, I've got these variables up top. Let's say I want to know where those are all used. One of the options I have is I can right-click and say Find All References. This is cool. So Shift F12 will do this. And I click on that. Now you're going to see over on the right-hand side every place the color violet is used in this file. So you notice it's line 284. Now it's 339. So I can just use the up and down arrows to kind of toggle between these. And I can take my mouse and I can cursor into here and I can say, hi. You can actually type inside that window. And if you want to go look at it, you can just double click or enter and you can get in there too. So that's cool, and escape gets you out of that mode. And again, inside of the less, we can just hover and we can see where it would apply, or we can hold the command key down to get a preview. So that shows us some CSS, some less, and some HTML. Let's go take a look at our Bower JSON. So I'm inside of Bower JSON now, and inside of here, maybe I want to get some IntelliSense. So I can type in something here, and I can say, all right, with my Bower file, I want to go look for maybe some other Angular file. So I can type in Angular, and then I can hit my Control space, and it's going to load everything in from Bower that starts with AN, which should be quite a bit. So let's type in some more, like Angular. Say, oh yeah, I wanted the Angular absolute need, whatever the heck that is. And therefore, it will automatically enter it for you, which is pretty cool. We also have the same support for package JSON for Node. Now inside of Node, maybe what I want to do is I want to add gulp. So as a dev dependency or whatever I've got here. So I can type in GUL, no suggestions, not working. Okay, it should be working. And then we can do the version and actually hit the control space on there. And it'll show you the latest version or the latest version that matches the most recent major or the one for the most recent minor. So we've got quite a bit of features right out of the box with JSON. So one of my other favorite features of this is, let's say you're using a JSON file that has schema information that's known to us. So like, let's go back to the Bower file. If I type in comma here, and I come down into space, and I hit Control space, you're going to see all of the properties that Bower JSON supports. So this is cool for me because I actually realized the other day I was doing something that was just completely wrong. So inside of here, I had a repository, a public one, I'm ashamed to say, where I had in repository. And I wrote down for repository right like this. I said, okay, my repository is HTTPS, and whatever my repo was. And I opened up this in code, and I've been doing this now for like 6 months. Opened this up in code, and I saw the green line. I'm like, what is it telling me? Oh, wait a minute, it's telling me that repository is not a string. So if I hover over that, it says, oops, let's do that again. It's actually not the thing. It's expecting an object. So I said, well, let me fix that. So now I typed in comma, or let me just go type repository again. There we go. And it tells me it's an object. And if I control space again, it sees there's a type, and it defaults it. And then I can go down here again and say, all right, now there's a URL. And I can type my URL in here. So it's really nice that we get all this JSON schema IntelliSense right out of the box for what we're doing. So you can see there's quite a bit right out of the box that helps us write JSON, CSS, less, and tons of other things. All right, so let's switch projects a little bit here. Let's get rid of him, and let's open up code and take a look at a TypeScript project. So here's my TypeScript project, and it's basically the same thing you just saw a moment ago in JavaScript, but now I'm using TypeScript. So inside of TypeScript, out of the box, we're going to get even more features. So every class and every interface and every thing we write inside of TypeScript, we're going to be able to see all the IntelliSense. So right up here, I've got an interface for iDashboard VM. Let's say I wasn't implementing it. Let's say one of the features was a title property. See it down here in line 30. If I comment that out, you're going to see a red line out of the controller telling me you don't implement the interface that you're supposed to be implementing. You might want to go back and take a look at this again. So we can come down here and we can implement our title. And if you're wondering how I'm commenting and uncommenting fast, I'm using Command/ to comment and hitting it again to uncomment. So let's take a step back again and forget about the code for a minute and think about how do you get around so fast? Well, the whole thing about code revolves around this command palette idea. So if I hit Command P, I'm going to get the main command palette, and you'll see this little caret up there. The caret will tell you different things you can type. So let's say I want to know how do I debug. Well, I can hit debug in here, and I can go look and configure it. Let's say I don't want that, but I may want to run a task. So I can go ahead and type task in there. Also, if I get rid of the caret, you can see I can type in any file I want. Now, I could also hit Command O. So I hit Command O when I want to find a file and say, I want to go find the gulp file. I type in gulp, go down, hit enter, and it's right there. So it's really, really quick files to get around. Let's say that I want to go back to the file I was just on. If I hit Command OO, it actually goes back to the last file that I was on. So basically what happens, Command O brings it up, another O will go down to the last file, and then another one will go down, and you can also use the arrow keys. But this just allows you to navigate around your project super fast. So Command P opens up the command palette. Command O is going to open up the file palette like that. And if you have errors in your file, which we do in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see that little warning sign. We can click on that to see an unused local function in my gulp file. Or what I could do is hit Command-Shift-M, and that'll bring up the error palette or the problem palette. So we can see all these different things that we can search for inside of here. Let's say that I'm looking for a particular symbol in my project or file. I can hit Command-Shift-O, and now I can type in the symbols. And you can see these are all the properties and functions in my project. So I can say, all right, I want to find something called news. Well, there's one in the interface and one in the controller. Notice what happens when I toggle between them with my arrow keys to actually find them in that file. Now, if I put a colon after that, it actually tells me and groups them by properties and functions. So if I have more than one kind of thing in there, like this, you'll see that I've got classes, interfaces, methods, modules, and properties. So it'll actually sort them. Whereas if I get rid of the colon, it just lists them all in alphabetical order, at least I thought it was, in here, actually by type. So it's a quick way to find things by symbol, which is super nice. You can also type in pound to find something if you wanted to go find something like news across your entire project. So what if you can't remember all these commands? Well, you just hit Command P or O to bring up this palette, and you hit the question mark. And it'll show you all the different kinds of commands that you can run. And then there's also Git commands that you can type in. So we could do that and type out, hey, checks out. That's cool. Let's take a look at Git. That's that funky little button over here on the side. We can hit that guy. And now as I make changes in here, let's say here is a change. Automatically, I should see it save. Why is it automatically saving? Because under File, I've got Enable Autosave, which is nice. It actually saves right after you're done typing. So right here, I can say, what was that change? Now I can see file comparisons, where red is deleted, green is added, and I think blue, I'm a little colorblind, I think blue is changed. So if we get back out of there, we can click on it, and then we can revert it by hitting this little funky arrow for clean, or we can stage it by hitting the plus sign. So we'll get rid of that, and it's irreversible, no worries. And we're back up here. Let's say you wanted to compare this file to somebody else. Let's compare the TypeScript to JavaScript just for fun. I'm going to select it for compare, and then I can highlight the JavaScript file, and let's go ahead and compare with dashboard TS. So now we can use the same kind of comparison tools to show what does one file look like compared to the other. So it's pretty cool that we can actually do this right inside. Not so useful in this particular example, but kind of nice overall. Now if I want to close the active window that's open, I hit Command 1 and Command W, and we're good to go. So we've seen quite a bit of stuff that we can do out of the box. Let's go ahead and take a look at some custom things we can do. So keyboard shortcuts are really cool. If you hit up on the palette, Command P, type key, you'll see keyboard shortcuts, which will open up this keyboard shortcuts file. This is read-only, and then it opens up on the side pane one that you can change for yourself. For example, you'll see I created a command called Shift-Command-K, which is going to let me run a task, so I can actually run my own gulp tasks. So code is aware of gulp. It doesn't have gulp support per se, but instead it says you define gulp and do whatever you want in there. I will connect you to it. And basically it'll let you run those tasks. So here I've got all the commands I could run. And if I come down here and I find one I like and I want to overwrite, I just copy it and then paste it to the right. And there's other ones that have not been defined down here in the bottom. For example, I created a shortcut for changing the light theme or dark theme that you saw me do earlier. That's Control-Shift-D. So if I do Control-Shift-D, the whole thing turns dark. If I do L, it turns back to light. And that's not out of the box. That's something that I added just to play around with, because I can't decide what theme I like half the time. So back over here with the run task, let's say I wanted to run a task. Well, first, let's prove that I actually have one. So if I go down on my list, you should see a gulp file. And there she is. We'll get rid of the editors that are open. There we go. And let's go ahead and open a gulp file. And the gulp file is, if I could spell gulp, right there. And in here we've got a bunch of tasks like tscompile and tscompile server and tswatch server. So let's say I hit Command-Shift-K. That's a command I created. It's going to pop up tasks inside of the command palette. Let's say I didn't have a custom command. I can hit Command-P, delete the colon there, and I could do task space. That's just another way you can go, or Command-O and type task. Then once I type task, it's going to look for anything that pattern matches. So I'm saying find me the ts-compile, and that's going to compile all of my TypeScript. If I hit that, it's going to go run the gulp task called tscompile, which runs the server and the client. It's going to compile all of my TypeScript over to JavaScript. Now, to be clear, the feature to compile or transpile from TypeScript over to JavaScript is not out of the box with gulp, but I'm using gulp to get there from code. So inside of my gulp file, we can see that I've got this run TypeScript right here, which is effectively just running the TypeScript compiler out of the box to hit all my folders and then create the JavaScript files. So the way this would work is, let's open up a file. Let's actually see this happening. And we'll go into admin. It's a smaller file. So here's my TypeScript file for admin. I'll open up a second pane, and we'll open up the JavaScript file. So on the left, I got my TypeScript. The right, I've got my JavaScript. And let's say I wanted to make a change up here where I'm changing title from admin to foo. It's not going to save to the right automatically, even though it saved the file, because I haven't compiled yet. But if I opened up a compiler here, and let's actually go to a third pane. If I open up a compiler here, or task ts-compile, it should compile everything for me. And then right here, you can see in the middle pane, it changed over to foo. Make that a little bit bigger by getting rid of window 3. Now you can see that it actually updated and compiled right in place for me. So that's kind of cool. What if you wanted to do this automatically? I'm glad you asked. Let's say we go back to that task, and now we do tswatcher. So we can set the watcher to watch all of our files. And then once we have that open, we can look at this guy and that guy. And as I type in instead of foo, I can type in bar. As it saves, it should update over, yep, there it goes, on line 9 on the right-hand side. So every time I type something in here, I can say, can you keep up with me? If I do that, it should appear over on the right-hand side in a couple of moments. There we go. And if you want to kill that task, there's a couple ways we can do that. We can kill all these guys. Oops. I can terminate the task once I do all this. I can cancel the shutdown. Or I can use a custom command, which I did Command-Shift-X to actually terminate the task. How did I know that? Because I went to key bindings. And you can see in here, I've got a terminate task, which is Shift-Command-X, which just makes it easy to make sure your task isn't running. So let me run that task just one more time. Here I've got the watcher, and I'm running. Notice the right-hand side of the output window opened, and it says finished, but it actually hasn't completed yet. So I'm going to kill it with Command-Shift-X, which is the key binding I created. Now it says it got a cancel, but let's run it one more time. So I'm going to run my task called TS Watcher. And now notice the bottom left. There's this funky spinning bar, the pipe symbol, next to the errors and the warnings. What that means is there's a task running. This is important because sometimes you'll close that output window and you're just kind of chugging along, and you don't realize that you're actually occupying a process. So that's why I created this Command-Shift-X to cancel it, and once I do that, you can see that it's no longer running. So that's kind of key, and one of the reasons I like adding that feature in there. But that's kind of the whole heart of Visual Studio Code. It allows you to customize things the way that you want to work with it. So let's do one more thing. Let's go ahead back into our JavaScript project. And over here, let's go into Gulp Patterns. Let's make sure that I haven't got any crazy changes out of this whack. That's okay, that's just comments. Cool. So let's say I wanted to debug. So over here I can hit this debug button. Now I've got this crazy wheel which I can click on. And the crazy wheel up here is for configuring my debug. You notice you get some configurations out of the box. I didn't change anything in here other than where the program lives. By default, I think it starts in just app.js in the root. So what this means is if I run this configuration called launch app.js, it's actually going to look inside my files. Let's go look at that. Over in the left, you can see how great I am with the mouse. Under server, and then there's an app.js right there. That's my node process. So what I want to do is see, all right, when I run launch app.js, it should run that app.js and run the debugger. Or I've got attach as another debugging process, which says, hey, I'll attach to whatever thing running on localhost is, that's what the address is, on this port, which is the default when you run with --debug with node. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of this. If I'm inside of my app.js file, and let's set a breakpoint for, I don't know, right there. That looks like a good idea. And let's open up a second pane, and for this one, we'll open up the tasks again. So I can go ahead and say tasks, configure the task runner. We can see it over here, and we can open up debug, and there he is. That's my launch. Now, if I want to, once I click on my debug pane, I can say go ahead and launch that guy. So when I launch him, you'll see it opens up a terminal window, and it's debugging. And over here on the right, you can see the debugger stopped on the first line. So let's kind of just walk through here. And if you hover, you'll see some keystrokes that are available. Let's go ahead and hover again. Step over is F10, or you can just click the buttons here. And as I'm clicking through them, everything's working. And let's get down. Now, if I hit run, it's going to run all the way to the breakpoint on line 17. Bam, just like that. And then we can hover. We can see that's undefined. We can see what app is. That's cool. We can actually look at other objects like this 404 middleware that I created. It's my own code. It actually defines what's in that. We can also take a look at other values that are in here. If they're undefined, they won't show up. The directory name, which is pretty cool. I mean, think about that. Now you don't have to know what all these properties are, and you don't have to use Node Inspector or anything like that to actually do your debugging. So I can set another breakpoint down there, and I can hit run, and I've jumped all the way down there. Now I can check out what routes is. That's undefined at this point. And if I'd like, I can come over here on the left, and I can see my locals window. So I can dive into what app has inside of it and take a look. I can also see what my file name is up top. If I want to see some custom things I created, like the 404 object, you can see there's a send 404 method on it and a middleware called not found middleware. So we've got quite a bit we can look at, including the call stack. And then we can also tell it where are the breakpoints, and you can disable those or delete them. And you can also break on any exceptions if you wanted to, which is pretty darn cool. So let's get rid of him. And let's go ahead and come down to ping. And I'm going to hit run. It shouldn't stop there. And we'll keep running. Good. So now if I open this up inside the browser and I hit ping, then I would automatically just break right inside that breakpoint. So you can see we've got pretty cool stuff we can do with JavaScript. And I believe TypeScript debugging is coming imminently. There was an issue with source maps that they were figuring out. So what they did is they actually pushed it off to the next release, which I think should be coming up actually today or tomorrow, which will have TypeScript debugging hopefully. And then the other thing is ASP.NET and C# debugging, which is also coming very soon. So for right now, we've got JavaScript, which you can do with Node on the server. We don't do client-side debugging here. We actually use the browser to do that, which makes it a lot easier. And then let's show a task actually run. This is kind of cool. So let's say I run my Command-Shift-K, and I do task. And I've got this task up here called serve dev. Now, I defined this myself in my own gulp file. But I can hit that. It's going to run through and show me all the output. And what you can't see, and let's go ahead and open over here. Let's do that again. I'll open them side by side so you don't think I'm playing any mirror tricks on you. Kill that task. We'll kill him. We'll kill him. There we go. So let's kill that window over here. Actually, let's kill everything. So now we've done that, and let's go ahead and run our task, and we'll run serve dev. And you can see the output piling up, and then you can see the window opening up, and therefore my app is running live. Now what's nice about this for my workflow is I can keep the app open over there, and now I can go back inside of Visual Studio Code, and I can say, let me go find, I think this is called customers, HTML, and I could change something in customers if I wanted to. Or maybe I want to find the customer's controller. And inside that controller, when it activates, I actually want it to say hello. So let's just see H-E-L-L-O, like that. Hit save, and as soon as it saves, it's automatically going to change and refresh using browser sync on the right-hand side. So I've got a pretty good workflow right out of the box. That's not good enough. Let's try something else. So let's say I've got a task called test, where I run my tests over there. Or I could have one called serve my specs. So serve specs is going to launch in the browser all of my test files. It's connected over here, and you can see my one failure. So I can see I've got activated. It's seeing here it's expecting the error message to actually be hello. So let's go into the customer controller file, and you can see it says hello here. If we wanted to, as soon as we fix that, which is expecting it to be, oh, I forgot already what it's supposed to be, activated customers controller, or view, I think it was. So we do that, it's going to rerun the test automatically for me, and it looks like I guessed right. That was actually what the test was looking for. Not a great test, but shows you the point is you can get a really good workflow in there. So we've seen quite a bit, and I'd like to wrap up a little bit here and kind of get to some questions. There's a lot more that this tool does, but the key is that there's so much it can do, and this is just a preview, and you can see how fast that I'm flipping through this whole environment. So let's go back to the slides here. I'll end my sharing. I wanted to let you all know, too, before we kind of wrap up, that I'm actually putting together a first look at Visual Studio Code that will not be a whirlwind like today was. And it'll be coming out, hopefully, be finishing by the end of this month, but hopefully be out by July 4th. We shall see. You can check that out pretty soon. It'll be a quick first look at what's coming down the road and what you can do today from TypeScript, JavaScript, Node, ASP.NET, and so on. So what's next coming from this tool? Extensibility. The biggest complaint, request, suggestion, whatever you might say, and again, this is all preview, is that there's no plugin model right now. And that's something they're actively working on. They've heard a ton of feedback, and it's the most requested issue on User Voice, which is up there for Visual Studio Code, to add all these different features. So the community could actually add plugins for things like JS Hint if they wanted to, although there are some features to that out of the box. Or maybe add theming or whatever else you want to it, because it's all based on the browser. So a lot of this is coming, and you definitely want to vote on User Voice for whatever you want. They're going to expand with more features about Roslyn, because that's what the ASP.NET stuff's based upon. You're going to have ASP.NET and TypeScript debugging, and there's just tons of stuff coming down the road that you could use here. And you can start putting your questions into the chat window if you'd like to, because I'll be done with this in a second. I'll get to those for you all. So I promised that we have some resources too. And if you're interested more about TypeScript, definitely check this out here, TypeScript Lang, and you can also check out the OmniSharp library too, two of the core pieces that are built into Visual Studio Code. And the best thing I can tell you is get involved here, because the VS Code is, again, just preview, and they just started getting this out the door just a month ago at Build. And there's so much more coming. So if you want a feature, go ahead and vote for it. Go to this Connect link right here at Visual Studio Code, home/connect. And if you go there, you can actually vote up your feature. So search for features you're looking for, and you get 10 votes, and just vote up what you want. Add your comments in there. You can actually add screenshots and things too, which is cool. You can actually file bugs. You can send suggestions. There's an insiders group, which everybody in this call has any action. You should go there, sign up for the insiders group. What it allows you to do is basically get some extra features that they'll send you, for example, when they have new drops, which is pretty darn cool. And if you want to talk to the team, you want to use Twitter to do that. They actually listen in at code. It's pretty cool. They got a really cool Twitter handle. And if you want to play with what I showed you today, you can actually get the samples that I showed both through the TypeScript demo, the last link here. That's the one I showed doing TypeScript. If you want to get the JavaScript demo I did, you can use my Yo generator called Yo Hot Towel. You go up there and load that off NPM, and it will create you a simple Angular JavaScript project. You can load in VS Code on Windows or Mac, either way. And then if you just want to learn more about Visual Studio Code, of course there's the docs, but I wrote a blog post series too that starts with this post, which explains all the different things that you can do with Visual Studio Code. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and hit some of your questions. So I'm going to read some of these off here. So we've got Jerion is asking if the Git integration is the same as in Visual Studio. First, there's a couple questions here. So first, it's not exactly the same, meaning it's a little more simplistic, meaning you're not going to have every feature you get with Git out of the box. And I think that's okay. This again falls back to editor versus IDE. You're going to get things like your basic commands like clean and check out and commit and push and pull and sync, doing diffs and statuses. That's all there, doing branches. But more advanced stuff you're not going to get from there. You can still use command line, or my favorite tool is honestly using source tree. When I have to do really complex stuff or need to visualize things deeply, I like to flip over to a full tool like a source tree. Next question. Is there a way to have IntelliSense without polluting my files with file markings, extra folders and files? Yes. Yes, there is. I showed you the easy way today to get the IntelliSense with TypeScript and JavaScript projects. There are better ways coming very soon. And one of the reasons for that is there is a file called tsconfig.json, which you'll get if you pull down my TypeScript project. And that file helps the TypeScript compiler, which is new to version 1.5 of TypeScript. It helps that compiler figure out the information it needs to do all that IntelliSense. So you won't need all that, but will you need the extra files? Yes. So it's going to need the typing files, which you just put in your git ignore. You don't actually have to load those in your project if you don't want to. And you can use TSD, which is a command line tool, to pull those down. So having the files there, yeah, you need that. But actually dirtying your files up, no, you will not need to do that, which I think is pretty cool. Will all these integrations like TypeScript, Emmet, etc. be exposed via plugins? I don't know if they all will be, but most of them will be. So that's why they're taking their time to do the plugin system right, in my opinion. They're trying to think about what are all the use cases, and let's get this right. And I know that's, if it's not the top thing on the list, I know it's right near the top. Will it support Sass as well? I believe that's on their list, and if you'd like that, you should go upvote that on the user voice. So I'm using VS on Windows. Is there a need to use code? I was waiting for that question. So first of all, and I know you're not asking this, but I just want to make it clear, Visual Studio is not in competition with code or vice versa. Visual Studio is a full-on Windows IDE. Code is super fast. So if you saw my beginning opening where I opened up code and how quick it opened up and started letting me type, and how fast I can move around it, and when I run it's instant, that's the reason to use VS Code. In my opinion, I use code 90 to 95% of the time, and when I need to do something really, really deep, like with an IDE, that's when I'll open up WebStorm or Visual Studio, depending if I'm on a Mac or Windows. So for me, VS Code is now my de facto editor. And I have used in the last 2 years Sublime, Atom, Brackets, Vim, TextMate, missing one, WebStorm, Visual Studio, and now VS Code. Is it possible to change which diff tool code uses? Not sure, honestly. That's a good question to ask the team. But probably in the extensibility they're trying to do, that would be a good question. So the team is trying really hard not to tie themselves to specific tools, but to make it easier to plug in. Like if you don't like Gulp, they're trying to make it easy for you to use Grunt or Broccoli or whatever you want to do, or Jake. All right, does VS Code support VB? Not yet, as I'm aware. Is there a hot tile generator for TypeScript? No, but as soon as I get some free cycles, there will be, because I've already created a project for it. I'll probably just extend the regular hot tile to make it work for TypeScript. Does code play well with VS 2015 on the same project? Yes, kind of. So let's say you created a project in Visual Studio and then you wanted to open it in Code. That works great. If you create a project in VS Code and then try to open it in Visual Studio, the problem is going to be that Visual Studio wants a CSproj file and a solution file and a bunch of other metadata. So right now that story isn't as great, but you can open up, VS Code can open up anything because it doesn't need any of that stuff. I expect that to get better too, though. So let's go to another question here. Can the version of TypeScript used by code be changed if you wanted to test the TypeScript 1.5 beta? Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually using 1.5 beta right now with VS Code, so you can do that too. The tasks work with Grunt. Yes, you can run Grunt tasks, but I believe that, and I may have this wrong, so let me try to frame this right. I believe that VS Code out of the box can automatically detect the gulp file and read those tasks, but I believe this particular version that was out 3 weeks ago as a build does not read the Grunt file by default. But I know that is coming. It does not seem to autocomplete ARIA roles with HTML tags. Good question. You might want to go ahead and put that into the bug list that they have. How long are you going to support Mountain Lion? I have no idea. I'm not supporting anything, so that's not me. But you might want to ask the team that question. Can you use it for PHP stack? I know that's a high request on their user list. Let's see here. Reading some more questions. Visual Studio Code has Git integration. Should I consider moving my source from TFS to Git? That's kind of a loaded question. So Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code can both use Git. That's kind of the de facto out there these days. But more importantly, TFS actually can use Git as well. So even if you like TFS as a front end, I do highly recommend and I prefer using Git as a back end. How do I connect to sync with GitHub? One of the cool things, and I didn't show this here, but our build presentation did, is if you just create a brand new project right in your hard drive, and then there's a button that will allow you to basically initialize your project in the Git pane with a git ignore file and initialize your Git repo locally, which you then can push up to like Azure or wherever you want to put it with a GitHub. So yeah, you can automatically connect those up too. And for more information on that, check out the docs. Let's see here. Do I understand that .NET apps cannot be built from Visual Studio Code? Actually, that is not correct. You can actually build .NET apps like ASP.NET 5. Anything that runs on .NET Core can be used with Visual Studio Code. So for example, I do ASP.NET 5 100% on a Mac. I think we have 2 minutes left, so I'll just do a couple more here. And I'm going fast on purpose, so I apologize. Are the shortcuts the same for all 3 platforms? I believe they are out of the box, but you can change them any way you like, so that makes it easy. How does a lack of plugins get in your way when doing day-to-day coding? Right now, it's getting in my way a little bit because I like JSCS, which is a code styling compiler or code styling checker, and I can't actually do that directly with Visual Studio Code, but what I can do is I wrote a gulp task, which runs JSCS, so I can run that, and it's got this thing called a problem matcher inside the task, which I can then read my JSCS output that comes in terminal, and it puts those problems right into Visual Studio Code in the error and warning window. So it's not in my way so much that I had to work a little bit harder to get that functionality, which these are things I expect to be more out of the box with plugins. Is there a VS Code converter for 2012 projects? No, you really don't need to convert anything. You can just point VS Code at any project you want because it's just folder and file based. How is the web service debugger? I haven't tried this on web services so much at this point, just a lot of Node, and then the ASP.NET stuff is coming soon. So let's keep going here. If I had to pick an editor today, would I go for Brackets, Code, or some other? So I've been using Brackets now as my de facto editor for 7 months. I really, really love Brackets. It's fast, and it's powerful, and it looks great. I can use it on both environments, on both platforms. But VS Code is the one I've been using for the last 2 months now, before it came out and then after, and I have not looked back. I love it. So today I would use Code on Mac, Windows, or Linux, and that's what I am doing. All right, last 2 questions. Is it possible to get IntelliSense for CSS classes in HTML? I do not know, but I imagine that should work. I haven't tried it yet. And I mentioned support for C#. Does that mean you can create .NET apps using OS X? Absolutely. You can do that today with Sublime. You can do it with any other you want, WebStorm. You can use it with Code. So ASP.NET 5 Beta actually works on OS X and Linux. And when I write my code with that, I do it with VS Code. So that was my whirlwind of questions. I think I got them all. And I'll hand it right back to Lindsay.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Thank you, everyone. That's all the time we have today. Thank you for your participation. If you have comments or feedback, you can email us at webinars@pluralsight.com. This webinar was recorded, and we'll email the link in a few days. Remember to tweet about your experience today and continue the conversation online with hashtag PluralsightLive for a chance to win a free month of training. And remember, as you leave, please fill out our survey. Thank you again. Have a great day.